So now that I've expended a lot of the fembots in my collection, I need to hold back the rest just to shake things up from time to time. So we gotta go back to reviewing the boys. And in light of last week, I think I'll avoid anything using translucent plastic. So in that case, let's review an Armada toy. In this case, Cyclonus. I've been meaning to get to this one in a while. I don't know why. I don't know why I keep putting it off, but here we go. Let's give it a look. This is, of course, whoa, saved it. Yeah, this certainly didn't look dorky or anything. Of course, Cyclonus does not look the same as the Cyclonus you are probably more familiar with. This is, of course, the Decepticon helicopter of the Supercon size, as we had gone away from calling them deluxes for one whole year for some reason. And he is something of a Cybertronian helicopter. Even though the show says his vehicle mode was scanned on Earth, what helicopter have you ever seen that looks anything remotely like this? You might have seen a flat-nosed helicopter, but not one armed to the teeth like this, at least none I've ever seen. It's a very strange amalgamation of, you know, your local news copter as well as a heavy attack copter. Very strange design, but I admit, I've always been a fan of it. It looks like a serious war machine that flies and shoots anything and everything it might wander across. Now, this does leave it a little bit lacking in the disguise category, as it's very clear what everything is. You can see his hands, of course. You can see where his legs are folded up. He's really not hiding anything. So, it's not the best of disguises, but it does make a unique helicopter. I will say, structure-wise, I've never felt comfortable with this toy just because this section just rocks. There's no real way of pegging it in, and the way it fits doesn't fit flush enough to prevent that movement. So, there's always a bit of a rickety feeling when you're playing with this vehicle mode. Of course, it is cast in a fairly nice sky blue plastic with some off-white as well as a bit of brown here and there. It's a different color scheme. It kind of works. You can see for paint, we have a lot of purple for accents, of course, across the wings, the intakes, and the front. Some dark blue as well, just to give it a little bit of a two-tone look, which very much needed and very much appreciated. There's some parts molded in it as well. Now, for features and details, he is loaded. Like, one of the things Armada loved was just heavy amounts of surface molding. You can see just through the tail alone, tons of stuff crafted and molded in. Even in the back, he's got a thruster molded in. I don't know why a helicopter needs one, but there you go. And of course, on top of the wings, you can see just like any blank space they had, they tried to fill up with some kind of tech jumble. The designers in this, like, just for Armada especially, it's kind of like the molding equivalent of Star Trek Technobabble. You're not quite sure what the molded parts are there for, but they are filling space and you feel like technology is happening. So it's pretty much the best way of describing it. Now, action-wise, you do have some missiles here, which we can launch if we so choose, as well as some guns just to give him a bit of a heavily armed look. Now, for features, of course, we can not notice the big trigger sticking out the tail, which if we pull, he gets a very powerful spin motor that stops very abruptly. Even if you hold the trigger down, it doesn't want to continue, which makes it a little bit awkward because in order to get a full spin, you have to do that, which is very grating on your ears and summons many of the ducks in the area while it's at it. They could have, of course, made that a little bit quieter, but they needed it to do that. They needed the extra torque for what else this figure can do. I'm going to set him aside so we can look at his Minicon partner, Crumple Zone. In contrast to the big, silly-looking helicopter, we have this adorable little tank. It's kind of a strange juxtaposition. Like, in ways it makes sense, but in other ways, look at how cute it is. I don't know, this looks like a little tank you'd see in like an 8-bit video game, just kind of chugging along. It's cast in the same colors, because of course this is gang molded to him. He does get a little bit of extra paint, just to get the treads painted along the sides, which he does have actual little tiny wheels just to make sure he can roll. and a little bit of paint just to give him some, I don't know, like headlights or something. I don't know. You can notice the molding in the back is a little bit strange, and that's because of everything else this toy does. First, just to get it out of the way, he does kind of roll. You know, there are little tiny wheels on a very light toy, so they don't roll that well. And his turret does rotate from side to side. That is good. The main feature of him, however, is the fact that he has a really unique integration with Cyclonus. If we transform him, you'll notice a completely new cockpit shape, which we can then take to Cyclonus. Excuse me, get your blade out of the way. Raise that up, and then we can latch it into place. This takes a little bit of finagling. I got it there pretty quick, actually. And thus, we have Cyclonus with a completely new cockpit section, giving him a far more aggressive combat chopper look, which is very cool. Like, I love how just like such a simple little change alters the profile of the vehicle so much, and it flows really nicely with the line. Keeping all of this section in the same sky blue as well as here, it gives this nice illusion as this kind of breaks it up, but it still manages to draw the eye and keep that line going, really creating this nice attack chopper look. I love what this does. It's a really neat trick. And what's a neater trick is, now if we pull the trigger, note the front. Oh, hang on, I gotta make sure I got the appropriate grip on this. I will admit, it doesn't work the best, but you do notice as this thing spins, it does kind of flick that gun left and right, which is a neat little trick that the combination not only makes him look cooler, but also adds another little motion trick to him, as if the gun is weaving side to side as it fires. That's kind of cool. And of course, if we had the right Minicon team, if I review those teams, I will discuss them. That same trick can be used to attach them under here and activate their rolling gimmicks, as they are all geared and clipped to attach onto the bottom of Cyclonus. And you can see the gear will rotate when the lever is pulled. This toy has a lot going on in vehicle mode. This is why I spend so much time on vehicle modes. I know some reviewers just kind of breeze through them and get by because, you know, let's get to the real deal. But I love when vehicle modes have so much going on to them that really makes it worthwhile as two toys in one. Which, speaking of, we need to get to that feature, so let's get him into robot mode, and it don't take long. Armada was not the most complex of lines when it comes to transformations. So we make sure that legs are clipped in nice and tight. Make sure they are completely straight. A little bit of automorph going on here as we get this section transformed. That will accordion all of this into place. Pelvis then moves up here. We move the hips down. Arms straighten out like so. Arm straighten out like so. Flip up the head, and that very simply gives us our look at Cyclonus in his full-on robot mode. Again, like I said, he really didn't hide where parts went. You could pretty much guess exactly how he was going to transform just by looking at the vehicle mode. But he forms up a fairly nice robot, doesn't he? So let's take a quick look at the head. It's kind of sunken in there. It kind of gives him this kind of heavy set look. And it does kind of get backed up by having a rather heavy looking face. Very wide nose, very heavy cheeked kind of look. With a slight snarled expression. It's kind of neat. Bright green eyes, molded blue helmet, and a unique orange to the face we saw in the Minicon, but here it makes it stand out from the rest of the toy very nicely. It's a unique looking head. It definitely gets the character across, as well as looking a little bit different than his other Decepticon counterparts of the past. Now, you'll notice the engineering of this toy that seems to lack anything locking in place in this section kind of hinders this too. So as I cover the robot, you'll mind if things start wobbling around or getting a little bit weird. For instance, his head now you can't see because his body kind of likes to rock backward. This is where the toy really kind of falls apart for me, where it really needed to have some way of just like clipping together and holding a lot more solid than he does. So that's kind of unfortunate. We can pretty much see just everything that was in vehicle mode now in the robot. There's really no new details showing here. We can see the arms more clearly. You can see all the extra painted details, really giving a little bit more definition to the arm itself. A little gold on the hands to separate them out. And really, yeah, literally, I really have nothing to say. Like, you saw all the details in the vehicle mode. You know, I can point out other things, a little bit of airbrushing on the toes to make them silver. There's really, I'm out of things to say. Like, it was all there in the vehicle mode. Proportion-wise, there are some little oddities, you know, like the fact that the wing is, like, supposed to be the shoulder, which does, from some angles, look really strange and kind of flimsy looking. The proportions themselves get a little bit weird from the side as well, as his shoulders are all the way back here, while the head is directly directly above the legs. So his arms are a little bit set far back, which is kind of strange at certain angles. And of course, there's really nothing you can do about the tail, because of course this is Armada, so it's all about gigantic gimmicks packed into small toys. And while you can still spin the blade to imitate flight in robot mode, yeah, it does leave him with a fairly large chunk of kibble in the back. Nothing you can really do about that. That's how gimmick figures in Armada rolled. Speaking of, hang on, let's very quickly, just while we're transforming, talking robot modes before we get to articulation, might as well cover the rest of him. I got to transform. I got to get this turret rotated back around first, and then we can flip the cockpit section out, rotate that around, and get a good look at Crumple Zone in his full robot mode. It kind of keeps to the same color scheme. You can see the tan in the arms, the baby blue on the legs, and the torso made up of the darker blue. He even has the orange on the face, and as well as the thighs being brown. He matches color-wise very nicely with Cyclonus. You could even get some of the same symbolism if you leave the cannon turret up. You can rotate it down, but that kind of imitates the look of his helicopter blade too, so they're quite a decent matched pair. It's very carefully chosen to make sure they match pretty much as well as they possibly could. Look at that. It's like a father and son. The son was a bit bulkier in the chest and obviously did more work at the gym. Articulation-wise, he's a Minicon, so arms move up and down. They also move up and down at the legs. There's a waist rotation and a knee bend, and that's pretty much all you get. So he's pretty much just there to stand around and make Cyclonus look like he belongs in the Armada line, which that's kind of what he does. For our articulation on his front, you do have a little bit of outward shoulder motion because of how the wings operate, but no real universal motion, unfortunately. The biceps do hinge forward, as well as the elbows hinging forward to 180 degrees thanks to transformation. No head rotation, no waist rotation. Weird rocking thing. Nothing universal in the hips either. They move back and forward. And the knees are locked in place, so you have to break them. You have to break the connection to bend them. Of course, they have great range once you do, but no hips, so there's really not a whole lot of posing you can get out of them. And of course, nothing at the ankle, because they really didn't work on ankle tilt back then. So, yeah, this is an Armada toy that kind of suffers to have that big gimmick. I will admit, the gimmick has a lot going on, and it does make for a fun toy, but the robot is mostly there to look at. There's really not a whole lot of action posing going on for Cyclonus, which is kind of a shame. But he does have a few other things we can do. If we attach his Minicon to his legs, for instance, we can get a little bit more armament in this mode. I don't know if it's just because the toy's that old or if they were always that tight, but yeah, it's kind of... come on. Okay, that one's stuck a bit. The spring's out on that one. Okay. Okay, good to know. I've got one to fix later. But yeah, you can raise those guns forward and give him a little bit more armament. Give him a little bit more of a I'm ready for pretty much anything as long as it's coming directly in front of me kind of look, as well as the ability to fire the missiles on the forearms, and that pretty much just happens with the pegging of... I figured out how to keep them from getting lost. Can you guess? So if I plug these into the forearms... I've got my floor cleaned up right now, so it's not a big deal. I'm not even going to bother making the little joke I always make, because, let's face it, I'm getting bored of it too. But yeah, he's got a ton of Minicon interaction. That's one thing I will give him props for. Not only his own Minicon, but the right Minicon teams also interact well with him. So he actually, more than most Armada toys, has a ton going on with the main gimmick. And of course, that does result in a robot mode that really doesn't work as an action figure. Though it still manages to look nice, he's got a unique aesthetic to him, and he does work very well for representing his cartoon counterpart. So all in all, in spite of being mostly about the gimmick, I can't help but kind of like Cyclonus. I think it's a worthwhile toy. It's got a lot of cool interaction with his Minicon, interaction with other Minicons. And the robot mode ain't too bad to look at. It's just not going to be the toy if you're looking for something to do like judo poses or anything like that, because he is a bit of a brick, as a lot of Armada toys ended up being. But hey, at least he wears his brickishness well.